Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming on a Sunday morning. Really nice to have you here. And having lived in New York City for most of my life, or all of my life, it seems that the homeless have always been around. And some hold cups, some ask for money, some exhibit depression or embarrassment, and they usually seem quite isolated and frequently appear demoralized and dehumanized by society. Some are barefoot and wear tattered clothes. Some wear old sneakers and shuffle along the streets of New York. And people usually ignore them. Their clothes are often tattered and inappropriate for inclement weather. Many have ashy skin and their hair is pretty much disheveled. I've seen a few with missing teeth, and sometimes folks smell of urine. When I encounter a homeless person, however, I feel immediate empathy. I silently wish them safety and peace. I feel compassion for the struggles they have, and I often feel curious about who they are, who they were, and what brought them to live this way. Do they have family? I wonder, where are they? Will a few dollars help? Will a sandwich help? I once brought a homeless man a cup of coffee on a very cold day, and he got very angry at me. He said, "Don't you know that coffee stimulates diarrhea?" I did not know that, and I realized that I assumed this would warm him. This time, my best intentions were not very useful. However, I'm always moved by their struggle and daily suffering. Making eye contact, saying hello, are things I feel are important, and I practice them with almost everyone. If a homeless person seems like they want to talk, I stay for a few minutes and I talk with them. I believe it reaffirms their humanity, and it is a practice. I learned about practice through Buddhism and would like to share the story of what drew me to Buddhism. I became interested in it through my own suffering, constant difficulties I experienced as a child, a teenager, and a young adult. By the age of 16, I witnessed numerous deaths and violence. The death of my parents at a young age impacted me greatly. Buddhism, however, offered me compassion and stability through meditation, the teachings of the Buddha, impermanence, gratitude, and loving kindness, including a deep understanding and acceptance of life and death. Classes began on August 25th, 1975. The Dharma talk that Master Sheng Yen gave impressed me so much that I've continued studying Chan for over 50 years. My life embraces Buddhist concepts, which include responding with compassion and loving kindness, patience, and other forms of compassion. I must admit, though, there are many times when I do not use these concepts and react instead of respond. When I read about the multi-day retreat, which the Bread Loaf Zen community planned to lead in the streets of Washington, D.C., with my dear friend Risa Sokolsky, I immediately wanted to join. As a Buddhist, I'd participated in countless retreats in this country, as well as India, Nepal, and Taiwan. These were usually held indoors and facilities designed for that purpose. A beautiful meditation hall with black pads and cushions, sleeping areas, very clean bathrooms, a kitchen, and a dining hall. Even before joining that one, I realized it would be very different. I knew that the downtown streets of our nation's capital, like many streets, in our own hometown, were filled with indigent homeless people. And I knew that this street retreat would lack the relative comforts and safety of the others I joined, putting me directly in the midst of human hardship and suffering I'd only observed and wondered about, but often found difficult to understand and powerless to affect. I had, of course, read about homelessness in newspapers, social media, and magazines, excuse me, and heard about it from social workers and healthcare professionals, as most of you have. But I wanted to bear witness, to better understand its reality, to test the limits of my empathy, and perhaps most importantly, to see what is causing harm in others. See the Buddhist practices that I have developed and such impact on my life. What would it mean in a vastly different context? I overcame whatever doubts I had about being on a street retreat among homeless people in the heart of an urban center and committed to it. That it would be under the guidance of a prominent Zen teacher, Joshin Burns, was also encouraging. The bread loaf retreat happened over the course of 4 days and 3 nights. It was led by Joshin from the bread loaf community. One prerequisite for this experience was to raise a mala. A mala is usually a series of beads on a string used to help a practitioner maintain single-mindedness when practicing. We were asked to come up with a different kind of mala, which was a way to raise $500. Asking for the financial support of others was a part of being witness to life on the streets. This process began about a month before the retreat. Asking people in your network of friends, family, or community members and acquaintances to contribute was encouraged. We were not permitted to contribute our own money to the mala. This was to promote the experience of asking, of reaching out, and begging, designed to reflect the experience of begging on the street and acknowledge those who donated. I strung alphabet beads to spell the names of each of my donors. Here it is. I brought it because I thought it would be interesting for you to see. Let's see if I can get it up. So there, I have 30 donors. So each donor has a name on the mala. I wore the mala every day of the retreat, and the others on the retreat were supported by social service agencies. I and the other were supported by social service agencies, which is where the mala money went. So what is a street retreat? You might be asking yourselves, what is it possibly take into account? It's a plunge into the unknown, an opportunity to go beyond our imagined limits in an environment with other struggling people. Basically, for 4 days, we lived on the streets of Washington, D.C. with no resources other than ourselves. Our group was together most of the time, breaking into subgroups for short times during the day and always secured by buddies. We gathered for meditative practice together twice and counsel. Partial participation was not an option. One could only join for the entire retreat. There were some specific guidelines for the retreat that I thought you might find interesting. Do not shower, shave, or wash your hair for 5 days prior to the retreat. This was the beginning of a street experience prior to leaving home. Wear old clothes, as many layers as you feel appropriate for the time of year, and do not bring any change of clothes for the retreat duration, except possibly an extra pair of socks and a change of underwear. Be prepared for weather extremes. Wear good but not new walking shoes. We walk a great deal. Bring one piece of photo ID only, your driver's license or a government-issued ID with your picture on it. Bring a poncho or a large plastic garbage bag in case it rains. Bring a $1 bill with you on the retreat. Do not bring any additional money, illegal drugs, alcohol, weapons, or cell phones. Do not wear any jewelry, including earrings, bracelets, and watches. Imagine not being with your cell phone for 4 days. It was interesting. Besides the clothes you are wearing, bring only an empty bag, shopping bag, plastic bag, or small, not new, day pack for collecting food from the shelters. You should not bring any books or personal items such as a toothbrush. You may bring a notebook. Necessary prescription medicine is also permitted. Be sure to practice rooting through garbage cans and picking up pennies on the street. It keeps us humble, and truly the treasures can be precious. Bring a used water bottle. If you like, they are available in trash bins. Remember to bring a blanket or old sleeping bag. We will use it to sleep in places that may not have anything like that. We begged for money, found places to sleep, got food where we could, and looked for toilet facilities. You may ask, why would anyone want to do this? My reason for going on this retreat was to bear witness to street life and issues of homelessness, and I wanted to discover my projections and boundaries regarding homeless people. I felt it was very important to take my practice off the cushion and into the world. So as part of the retreat, we were supported by social service agencies and nonprofit organizations. Since we were not chronically living on the street, we needed to make donations from the offerings of those who were supporting us. Each of us raised the $500 or more for the mala, which was donated to those who work to end homelessness in our communities. There were 7 of us. It was a crisp fall day when we met for the first time in front of St. John's Episcopal Church. This was the same church, you may remember, where former President Donald Trump held up a Bible and ordered peaceful protesters to be removed with tear gas. On our first day, there was no trace of the former president or the protesters. We walked away from the church and past this upscale stores, tall, shiny buildings, gourmet restaurants, and green manicured public spaces that line many streets in the nation's capital. These represent one side of the city. Our destination was McPherson Square, across the street from the U.S. Capitol building, which represents a very different side of the city. It is lined with rows and rows of tents. You can see one up there, occupied by 70 people in the downtown area. Here I saw a woman squatting on the ground, eating soup she had cooked outside her tent. Although the people represent a wide range of ages, races, and gender, from what I observed, most were men. Seeing these cramped encampments all over the square, I was moved to compose a pencil drawing of a single tent. I'll be referring to that drawing. To me, this tent represents thousands of tents occupied by people who call a tent home all over the country. The composition of this tent is at the center of the paper. I wanted to emphasize the importance of this portable dwelling. The rest of the page is blank, except for a small section of landscape and a building. This rendered image using a light pencil was of the Capitol. A few trees surrounded the building with a large tree trunk, almost in the center of the composition. The tent is in front of the trees, which seems to support it. The simple triangular shape of the tent is defined by the bottom half of its shadedness. One tall old tree is positioned directly behind the tent. I used a light, delicate line for the building and trees. The light line expresses the impermanence of the scene and the impermanence of the tent community, which live on a fine line of being displaced. I drew this tall, noble tree to show the strength that it takes to survive in public spaces. This shape with taut lines drawn from the tent represent ways in which the tent is supported by poles and stretched tightly by cords attached to pegs driven in the ground. The dark half circle in the center of the tent represents an opening. Usually it's a flap that is opened like a door. I imagine when it's closed, it's for privacy. Privacy is something that is very hard to come by on the street. The tent community has created temporary safe havens to provide people with shelter, some privacy, space for quiet conversation, and a safe place to sleep. I noticed when I came home that many people who are homeless sleep during the day. And I understand why, because it's quite difficult to find a quiet place to sleep at night. On the first evening, the retreatants and I bedded down in a circle under a tree in McPherson Square. A flattened piece of cardboard and a blanket did not protect me against the cold. It began to drizzle. The park got quiet. Ducks waded in puddles nearby, and their sounds amused me. I didn't realize there are so many ducks in Washington. At first, I experienced a calming sensation, and I thought of a baptism. The rain got heavier. I wondered if we would stay. My calmness began to ebb. I got nervous. Soon, Joshin encouraged us to find a drier place. We walked to the nearest metro station, which was clean and warm. Unfortunately, the metro in DC closes at midnight. We had to leave as the gates went down. Reminding myself of Buddhist impermanence, I felt okay again. We walked a few more blocks and settled on grates in the sidewalk. The steam heat from the grates warmed us temporarily before it went off at around 3 a.m. This meant we had to move again. A few blocks away, we found a scaffold. Safety lights hung from above it, which were on all night. They glared directly into our eyes. We did our best to settle in. Some of us slept, snored, or moved around. I couldn't sleep. My eyes were wide open as I watched the others. I stared at the inky blue sky, waiting for the light of day to appear. A chill went through my bones, which added to the pain I felt as my hip bone dug into the concrete through the cardboard. My mind kept repeating the words, "When will light come?" The night felt unending. I thought of other homeless people living in tents on the cold ground. I could not find acceptance in my situation. I wanted to go home. At sunup, the pale blue sky and feathery clouds made me feel better. We took turns using the clean bathroom facilities in Starbucks to wash up and relieve ourselves. I was keenly aware of how fortunate we were to have a sink and toilets accessible to us. The simple act of mindfully washing hands with soap and water in a clean sink was a practice. Afterwards, we walked to a local soup kitchen for a warm breakfast in an old church. There was a clean, large dining room with tables and chairs organized in neat rows. The floor was made of wood, worn hardwood. Food was presented in metal trays on a table. There were scrambled eggs, oatmeals, biscuits, fruit, mashed potatoes, muffins, coffee, and juice. It was served buffet style with paper plates, paper cups, plastic cutlery, and napkins. I was very surprised at the amount of food and also the variety. The cooks were in the back kitchen, dishing the food as needed. I heard them singing as they worked. We were hungry and ate with appreciation. I felt grateful for the many hands that were part of bringing their food to the table, their work in preparing and serving the food, the generosity of the church to offer us this meal, and the people in the room who offered conversation about their lives. I slowed down my eating. I looked deeply into the bowl, and I remembered that eating too is a practice. Afterwards, we headed back to McPherson Square. Josen led a 30-minute morning meditation session in the park. After meditating, the group was invited to reflect on how we were doing. Mentally, emotionally, physically, and with our practice. Mostly, we talked about experiences we had during the previous night and day. Finding a nearby place to urinate was an issue shared by myself and another woman in the group. During the night, we accompanied one another to a local portisan. As funky as it was, it provided relief, and we were grateful for it. After the sharing, we split into pairs in order to beg for money. One challenge for me was knowing what to say to people as they walked by. I asked the homeless person whom I met at the church breakfast for advice. The 3 words he shared was, "Got any change?" It seemed practical and succinct. So I stood in front of a Starbucks and I held out a cup. "Got any change?" I started asking. "Got any change?" People often walked by quickly. Others were curious, and several stopped to talk. Some people with children grabbed their hands and ran away. Some folks gave me dollars, while some others gave me change. Most who spoke to me told me that they only had credit cards. A young man dropped a $20 bill in my cup, which truly surprised me. It was the first example of the unexpected acts of kindness, compassion, and generosity we would witness as the retreat unfolded. On that one afternoon, the 7 of us raised over $1,000, money which was donated to one of the organizations that prepared food in a soup kitchen and in others that donated blankets to the homeless. On the second night, we returned to the scaffold, and each of us made our beds of blankets and cardboard as we had before. Aware of the pain on my side, in my bones, I was once more unable to fall asleep or quiet my mind. Once again, I stared at the dark sky and could not wait for it to turn to day. Thinking about how my discomfort added to my suffering, my mind was making things worse, actually. A basic Buddhist premise teaches us that physical pain is inevitable and we can't avoid it. I was making myself suffer, which made it worse. Suffering is optional. Forgetting this, I thought I lost my practice. Being in a meditative and sharing community helped. We talked about begging and the impact it had on us. Most people had a relatively positive experience, though some people had difficulty asking. The holding on to the tension and accepting the pain would have been something that would have helped me. There's a Buddhist parable called the 2 arrows. You may know it. That relates to my experience. It may relate to yours too. Let's say you get hit by an arrow. There's physical pain, as if you got hit by the COVID shot. We immediately start to feel pain and we wonder, will we die? Will anyone find us? Will we bleed to death? We make ourselves suffer from this pain. The second arrow is what the mind does. It gives us an option and helps us separate pain and suffering. We add it onto the pain. So I stopped judging my lack of sleep and pain as a bad situation. It was a challenge not to identify with this pain. Then there was a possibility that I was able to bring an acceptance, to shift a deep presence and acceptance. I suddenly felt joy just being there with the others, wishing that they were comfortable as well. By not allowing the pain to overcome us and accepting that it was there and can help us distinguish between pain and suffering. When I remembered this, I felt compassion towards the pain and myself. This led to acceptance in the sense that I changed my attitude and stopped thinking about lying on top of my cardboard bed on the cold concrete as torture. I understood that it was impermanent, and it was not just this body that was causing my pain and longing for a comfortable resting place. It was my mind. It was my mind as well, which had forgotten about suffering being optional. I felt emotionally connected to the others, sleeping on the sidewalk and wishing them comfort and freedom from whatever their suffering may have been. It sparked more compassion towards them, as well as to all those who would not be able to leave the streets in 4 days. I would like to share a poem with you by Dana Fault. Do you value your reasons for staying small more than the light that shines through the open door? Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. Now is the only time to be whole. Now. Now is the sole moment that exists to live in the right light of your nature. Perfection is not prerequisite for anything but pain. Perfection is not a prerequisite for anything but pain. Please, oh please, don't continue to believe in your stories of deficiency and failure. This is the day of your awakening. After a while, I stopped believing in my stories of deficiency and pain, and the sun appeared. I was finally at peace, and I had stopped waiting, and the grasping subsided. Grateful to witness this change, I recalled talking with some homeless people in McPherson Park who'd experienced a similar feelings of finding peace with the cold and coping with their suffering and understanding that it was going to go away. I felt emotionally connected to the others sleeping on the sidewalk and wished them comfort and freedom from whatever their suffering may have been. Some of them had blankets, others took newspapers to keep themselves warm. It sparked more compassion towards them as well as to all those who would not be able to leave the streets in 4 days. So what I did was I bore witness within myself that accepting and letting go of suffering can be joy. Rediscovering this old teaching, I found my practice. Okay. So when I got back home, I decided to create 2 drawings that reflected impressions of the people I encountered. I'm going to be referring to this drawing and another drawing as we go on. This first rendering of this first drawing was just that, a first rendering. It portrayed my emotional impressions of a number of homeless people. People I met in the street during the retreat. In reworking the drawing to create the image that you see here, I've chosen to enhance or retard some of the details from the first rendering. So these 2 drawings come from the original one, the first one on the right, and the left, let's see, left is, yeah, the right is the one that came first. The left is the one that is this reduction of the lines and everything. And that is to create the image that you see. I've chosen to enhance or retard some of the details from the first rendering more accurately to convey the emotions that I sensed in these souls met in the street. So if I may talk about the first one, the one that's filled in, this reminded me of the struggle and yet acceptance of the people that I saw. They were sitting on the ground, most of them grounded, just relaxed by putting their arm over their knee, and yet suffering because they didn't know how they were going to get their next meal. But there was a complacency and an understanding that this is not permanent. The man who has the prosthetic leg, told me that it was from an army incident and was not more specific about which army or which war he was in. And he just accepted it. He said, look, I have my shoes, I have my other leg, I have my foot, I can walk, even though I limp, I'm okay. So what that told me was that there were very specific issues and different issues that homeless people face. And not everyone has a prosthetic leg. However, they have a difficult time maneuvering throughout the day. So I decided to reduce the drawing to just the basic sense of what I saw in most of the people. And most of the people who I saw had very, very expressive eyes. So I particularly chose to render the eyes in this image as a pale reflection of the overwhelming sadness in the eyes of those I encountered. That said, I've also tried to convey the very human struggle for survival that I perceived in most of those that I met. Their determination to preserve their humanity in a world that refuses to see them as human beings is something I have tried to capture here as well. In creating this work, my objective was to create an image of the humanity of the homeless, using as my sources the people we met on the street and a simple pencil drawing. I'll let you be the judge as to whether I succeeded in doing that or not. And so upon coming home, I understood that even though we were on the street for 4 days, clearly we were not homeless. We bore witness to those who are homeless. And I understood that just because we were on a street retreat for 4 days, we only got a taste of what it's like to live on the street without any resources. And having done this retreat doesn't mean that we solved the issue of homelessness, even for ourselves. However, it gave us an awareness of what it is like to live on the street and not have resources. On a personal note, I've had issues with my teeth and have had to visit a dentist a lot. And I noticed that people did not have toothbrushes or toothpaste, things like that, all kinds of hygienic materials. At one soup kitchen, they had a table with toothbrushes, toothpaste, soap, shampoo, condoms, razors, and people were allowed to take as many as they wanted. So upon coming home, I had a deeper understanding that homeless people also don't have toothbrushes or easy ways to clean their teeth. So I volunteer at Lenox Hill Hospital. I do meditation with the cardiac patients. And the director let me take as many toothbrushes as I want, because I decided to distribute them to any homeless person I encounter with toothpaste. I also was aware not to say, oh, here's a toothbrush. I think that's really intrusive. So rather I asked them, I say, hello, how's it going? Would you like a toothbrush and toothpaste? And 9 times out of 10, they say yes. And they're very happy to have a toothbrush. A couple of times I met a person with just one tooth, and even he took the toothbrush because he wanted to keep that tooth, right? So this retreat gave me a better understanding of people who live on the street, and also a better understanding of us and how we look at people on the street, or particularly myself. That has changed dramatically. I don't see the people on the street as strangers or untouchables or disgusting. I see them as people, and even perhaps friends. I sometimes see the same people over and over, and I say hi now, and they know my name, and it's just a different attitude. So I will wrap up here, and perhaps some people can have some questions, which I'd be happy to answer. And thank you so much for listening and your presence, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Rikki. Now we're going to open for questions. Do you have any question for Rikki with the tremendous story sharing and experience? Any question from them?
What is the mindset of homeless people? It's not just financial hardship, right? It's a mindset that first leads to that scene of homelessness. What is your feeling or take or experience with them?
Thank you. What's your name?
Oscar.
Oscar, right. I remember you. The mindset of, I think, any group of people is more than one mindset. I mean, unless you're in some kind of a dictatorship, you're supposed to have the same mindset. My experience is that there are many different approaches to their lives, which is a mindset, right? Some are very generous and very kind, excuse me, with each other. They become neighbors in the tent community. Others become very isolated and do not respond to anyone in a positive way. Other people have mental illness, and so there's stealing and anger and all kinds of things that may go on because of that, because unfortunately they don't have access to a therapist or any kind of medicine. Other people have become very maternal and they want to be everyone's mother and make sure that they have food and take care of each other. And sometimes that's accepted and other times it's rejected. And so there's a lot of give and take for that. Some people were really curious about us when we were sitting in the park and having meditation, and some people decided to join us. So they were very open, wanted to learn about meditation. Other people just walked around and ignored us. So they were not interested in that. I think also it depended on how well they did during the day, whether or not they were able to get a meal, whether or not they got some money. It helped them in the night because they weren't hungry going to bed. And other people who might not have gotten that got a little irritable and upset, understandably. So I hope that answered your question, Oscar.
Yes, from the Buddhist perspective, the way I understand it is, we create our own reality because everything is mind. Yeah? We become that because we see that, so we become homeless because it happens to us first in the head, in the mind. So in that direction I'm going, Did they choose to be there? You chose.
Right. We chose to be there. Right.
Yeah.
Did they choose to be there? I would say, I can't say for everyone there, but the way that society treats people who might not have a home, who might have been evicted from their home, and who might have lost their job, who might have been excommunicated from their families, have nowhere to go. In that sense, I feel it's not in their minds. This is a reality of what's going on.
I'm going to share something very personal.
Okay.
I experienced homelessness when I was a kid. My mother, my dad died early on. I was 3 years old. My brother was just a month old. So, and we were also kind of in a new city, Buenos Aires, Argentina. My family come from the north, kind of a subculture within Argentina. So we stayed in a family shelter. My mother will work so hard throughout the day, and sometimes she will get back home very late with us, and the doors were closed. 9 p.m. we could not get it, so we had to sleep outside the shelter. I don't remember that. I remember I remember flashes, right? Seeing rats, seeing creatures, and I would panic. My mind would be, I guess it's like a defense mechanism that I would know. I didn't know when I see that. I didn't know when I see it. And as a result, I don't remember. And my mother tells me, what we went through for a few years until we became kindergarten age. And out of that, so there was something positive. A will to overcome was generated through those years. My mother, she gave us that, to overcome that state of homelessness. So I guess this is why I'm trying to also, see the homeless people, how they survive, but also they overcome that, is their hope. I see a lot of negativity in them. And I deal with them, I try to relate to them, to give them just a conversation. So that's basically it, that's what I'm going to share.
I agree with you saying that this experience, as horrible as it was and difficult as it was for your mom and for you and your brother, that it did make you stronger as an adult, for sure, because you have more compassion because you lived through it for other people, for children, for people like homeless people. So would I say that it was in your mind that you wanted to have this experience? I don't think so. I think it was, as Shifu would say, the causes and conditions. Cause of your mom, your dad dying, and then your mom in a certain situation, and she picking up and did the best she could for you and with you. And she could have done something else, like left you in an orphanage or something, and she did not. She helped raise you in that way, which is the best way she could. And now here you are in the meditation center practicing meditation and Buddhism, which I think is a testament to your upbringing in that way,
Yes.
even though it was difficult.
And I think because of that, that created something beautiful, out of that darkness, something great came out, which is this, I cannot believe that I met these teachings. It's a miracle.
Mm-hmm.
If I had not had that experience, my mother and all those struggles, I don't know. I don't know if I would have met this kind of teaching. I don't know.
Doesn't
Sometimes
matter.
I wonder
Doesn't matter.
if my life would have been easy,
Right.
easier.
Yeah, maybe. I think if there was a different approach in society with housing and with mental health care or medical care, there would either be no homeless or much less. I doubt that many people want to be homeless, although I have no idea if they want to or they don't want to, or they have no choice, right? At this point, they have no choice. Occasionally, I've heard about communities where they want to build low-income housing for homeless people, and the people who live in the community say, no, we don't want this here. So it's difficult. It's difficult to change things, but not impossible.
Thank you, Aska, for sharing the story. And does anyone have any questions online or here? If not, I have one question.
Okay.
So Aska shared his story about his trial life experience, and you share your story about the street meditation. You did mention about something about mind, and you are the instructor of the meditation. Do you have any recommendation that we may do a little practice similar to what you mentioned in the street meditation and retreat, the experience of having nothing and just suddenly have the toothpaste and toothbrush actually make your life brighter? Is anything that we may be able to relate to? Because I can relate to your comments about people usually thinking about the failure and the deficiency that they have in life, but not thinking about what they have already possessed on their daily life. So this is a mindset of where to put it, and maybe there's a practice we may be able to relate to.
Thank you. It seems like there's a two-part answer to your question. One is perhaps we can learn how to perceive those less fortunate than us, and not only to appreciate what it is we have. I think basically it's projections that we have about other people. We see people on the street and say, oh my God, she's so fat, she must eat a lot. Maybe she has some kind of condition, so that's not fair. We see this homeless person. Oh, he must want to be homeless. Oh, he just wants me to give him $1. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe he hasn't eaten in 5 days. So I think that's one thing about projection, and also projection about yourself. How am I looking at the person? Who is this person to me? And then who am I who's looking at this person, right? So I think that's a question, two questions that one can ask. The other thing about being grateful for things that we have in our lives, I remember hearing the Dalai Lama say that when he wakes up in the morning, that's good enough, right? I'm awake, I can hear, I can see, I can walk. It seems very typical and not very profound, and yet it is. So that's one thing. The notion of life and death, we have our lives this morning. We don't know if we're going to have it tomorrow morning. So let's really appreciate that about us, about our bodies, about our minds. Our minds are working. We could go to the toilet ourselves. You know, you may have somebody in your family who's not well, who can't think for themselves, who you are the one they go to. So that's another piece of it. And then not only the body, but what goes into the body, going to the supermarket, buying some food. It's an ordinary experience, and yet it's not. So to be able to stand on the line when you're paying for the food and feel grateful and just feel quiet and calm, instead of when somebody's taking a lot of time, they can't get the money out of their wallet, and you're like, come on, come on. It's saying, oh, okay, they're having a hard time. I'm going to stand here and I'm going to do my practice. I'm going to just be grateful that I'm here with my grapefruit or whatever it is, my bread, putting it in the bag. I'm grateful for this woman or this man who's checking me out so I can leave the store and not get accused of stealing. And so if you go through your whole day, each action, picking up a cup with tea, wow, homeless person usually doesn't have that. It's so ordinary for us. I think there's an expression to make the ordinary extraordinary. And so I think that's a part of it. If we could live our lives like that, if we could relate to a person like that, and just be so kind and accepting and grateful as much as you can, and grateful to yourself for being that way with somebody else. And of course, you can't do it all the time. You're not Buddha. None of us are Buddha. However, I believe that's a grounding for us to go back to. If we realize we're saying, oh, I am getting annoyed at this woman. Why am I doing that? And to go back and say, okay, I'll do it next time. And even when you go to sleep, you all have a bed to sleep in, a blanket, a pillow. It's a big thing. The first night I came back from the retreat, I probably slept like a baby. I was just so happy to be on a bed. It's really amazing. That's right. This ordinary bed was extraordinary. And yet, the ordinary piece of cardboard could not be extraordinary to me because I couldn't do it. I couldn't get there until the very end. And even then, it wasn't really extraordinary, but it was better. So I think that's also a trick, right? How can you make that ordinary extraordinary if you're in that kind of situation?
Thank you for that.
Okay, sure.
I have a
Jay.
question too
Okay.
also. So you're just saying because the homeless people they have very very difficult situation. So to me it seems like we use their suffering to contrast out our happiness. Yeah. How do you think this is the good way to do that? Yeah.
I think it's opposite. I think it's we who, what was the thing that you said about suffering? You said their suffering.
Because we use
their suffering
to contrast out our
contrast
happiness.
Our happiness. I don't think they do that. I think we do it. I think we notice their suffering or think we understand their suffering. And then we feel in a way we're okay. You know, we're not suffering like that. And yet we are suffering in many ways, aren't we? Right? You might lose your job, you might lose your lover, you might not get the food you want in a restaurant. So it's a different level of suffering, or you might get sick, you might get COVID. And theirs is a different kind of suffering as well. And And I think if you remember that pain is inevitable and suffering is optional, I'm not sure they have heard that before, but I know that some people who are in that situation feel that. Say, yeah, I have my leg, it's really messed up and I'm okay. It hurts once in a while, but I'm okay. So that to me is an example of understanding that the pain is there, but the suffering adds to the pain, right? He may not understand it from a Buddhist aspect, but he's living it. I hope that answered you.
I think you just bring out very good. You just bring out a point is even we have very difficult situation, but suffering is optional. Okay, thank you.
I would like to continue what Ting was referring to in your comments about suffering is optional. Is that, to put it more tangible kind of thinking, is that something we can choose not to think or define that as suffering, or such miserable experience is something we can avoid or not to think about? For example, if today my toothpaste is ran out, I don't even think about that. I can just skip that brushing my teeth for one day. That kind of thinking, or try to avoid that kind of thinking on the daily life.
I'm going to take your toothbrush story a little deeper, a little further. I don't think it's about avoiding it. I mean, yes, we can try to avoid it, but the pain's not going to go away. If I go to the dentist, right, and I told you I've been going to the dentist way too long, and he'll drill, whether he puts that Novocaine in or not, it hurts, it hurts, it hurts. And so what I've learned to do is understand that, okay, this is hurting. And if I keep saying, oh my God, my tooth is hurting, oh my God, he's really hurting me, that's going to make it worse. That's the suffering. So what I've learned to do is say, this tooth is hurting, right? Not my tooth is hurting. And so what that does is objectifies it. It's not my tooth that's holding on, that's hurting and free. It's this tooth is hurting and it's not always going to hurt. It's going to change. So that's a situation where, it's inevitable that he's drilling. It's definitely going to hurt. I can't get around that, but I can get around saying my tooth hurts. My God, what am I going to do? Da, da, da. And just say this tooth hurts. It changes it a little bit. It still hurts. It just doesn't hurt in the same way. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense, and actually, I appreciate that kind of thinking. Yeah, actually,
next time you go to the dentist.
Yeah. Oh, every time I go to dentist is a miserable thing. Just to listen to that sound is making my life hurt.
Yes.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Do we have any other questions? Anyone have toothpaste at home?
Can lend you some toothpaste.
Yes.
The homeless people see the non-homeless people as happy, affluent, right?
I'm sorry, I don't understand what you're saying.
The homeless people, how they perceive the ones that are not.
Right.
Coming back to her question, it all comes down to perception, because we also see them in a particular way, in that unconscious bias that we all have. And now when you do something, when you are shifting that thinking from within, like you did, it's a different picture altogether.
Mm-hmm.
So we choose to perceive. It's not we choose to suffer. We choose not to. However, there is the existential suffering, which is not a choice. It's just there, just by being born. Buddha Shakyamuni, he chose homelessness. in the forest, not in the street. You know, the monks and nuns also chose homelessness in the Sangha, not in the street, not in the forest. So how am I going to choose that kind of homelessness? In now, the takeaway for me is that the ordinary becomes great. Everything, every little thing, the things in between are magnified, have to be magnified. I mean, I have to appreciate that. So that's my takeaway from it. Because anything can happen. Tomorrow, a hurricane can demolish my house or become homeless. So I have to, anticipate that, I guess. At any point, I can lose the ordinary to me now, and some other ordinary will come. So I have to appreciate this moment.
Thank you, Oscar, for sharing. Appreciate the moments. Do we have any other questions? Any sharing as well? Talking?
This session, I brought in the last time I had the drawings, I didn't talk about them at all. And a few people asked me, why did you have these drawings? So I was just wondering if anybody had any comments about the drawings or have questions about what I said about them.
Oh, I do. I
Oh,
do.
okay.
Just because I attended your last session and I brought the two card
Postcards.
drawing, with me. And at home, I keep looking at them every in the beginnings, every single day, and even during the walk at home. Yeah, it's more than $1. So if we go to the tent one first,
Oh, okay.
backward.
Backwards. Is that it?
Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
So today I pay attention to even closer to what you mentioned about the street retreat and the tents. And that is the only one that you have during the street retreat. And the tree, so this is actually my first question, is the reason you have the tree behind it. And today you do mention about that tree could be the only cover of the tent, but there was rain.
Right.
So for why you have draw the tree? Was there a tree that day?
Yeah, there were trees, and the ones in the background are smaller because they're further away, so perspective. This one is closer to the tent, and I felt it wasn't supporting it. It just looked like it could support it. And it did support it with the leaves on top of the tent and it from the rain. And it actually it reminded me of something called the Mucha Linda in the Buddha statues. The Buddha is sitting in meditation and it starts to rain and rain and rain. And there are these cobras that come up. I mean, it's a fantasy, but it's the cobras that come up and protect him from the rain. You can see there are sculptures of them at the Metropolitan Museum. So that kind of reminded me of that. It's not the same, but that's why I did that. And that's why that tree is more defined than the other trees, because I feel it has more of a purpose to the tent.
Okay, here comes the second question. The reason you have the tents, the bottom part, using lots of the dark pencil color, so it's strengthen that area. Is that intentional, or it was that back then?
Well, both. It was that way. I don't remember what color it was, but some of the tents were dark at the bottom and light at the top, and then it has this little cone on top, which I'm not sure what that's for. So I felt that was grounding. The drawing showed that it was grounding the tent in the ground, and the other was a little bit ethereal, a little bit of moving away from the ground. So that was the idea, to have that solid color down there.
Yeah, the reason I mentioned about it prompted me to relate to the comment you make that the tent is the only privacy or the boundary that you have during the street retreat? Because I oftentimes find that something I need to have something belong to my own world. Define that this is belong to my own self. Was that the reason, or you just showing?
Well, actually, we were not in tents.
You're not in
No,
tent?
no. We left the tents for all the people who were living there. That's
Okay.
why we had cardboard. We were around areas of the tent, but these tents belong to street people. They did
I
not
see.
belong to us. And that flap, it was actually, if you look at the half circle on top, the kind of
Yes.
round area, that's open. It's kind of rolled open, and that's the opening to the door, and yet half of it is closed. So the person might be in there, and that's closed, if they're getting some air in there or whatever, or they left and they're coming back, but it's a way to keep it private.
Okay. But it has some small like window to see outside.
Yes, that's exactly
and
right.
air coming in. Okay. Now go to the second one.
Okay. I can do that. Okay.
Today you're using these two pictures as a transition from original one to try to emphasize the I reflection. I keep looking at that, but I would like to hear your story and how you sort of see this between these two picture that you draw, in terms of so on my side is the left hand side. The eye is a little bit darker, in kind of dark lights, that kind of illustration. On the right side, it started to bright a little bit. And the drawing on the left side, it's actually vivid in much of detail. You also show the lights shade, but the right hand side, it doesn't have that. Is there any purpose or reason?
Yeah, in these drawings, there's a purpose in every single
Okay.
line. So that person on the left, the fully drawn person, has those very strong darks and lights. And what that reminds me of, from what I saw, the darks and lights of a homeless person. That there's dark in their lives, there's light in their lives. It's not all dark, it's not all light. And the strength of the limbs, the arm, which is holding up his body, and then the leg that's just stretched out, and the other one kind of seems kind of relaxed. So there's this notion of tension and relaxation. And I think there's a lot of tension in the days of a person who's living on the street, and some relaxation. Like, for example, if they're in their tent, they're safe, they can feel relaxed. Yeah, the other thing about the face, again, it's this dark and light, this kind of, we call it chiaroscuro, dark and light in a drawing. And even though it's different for the other drawing, which is much more minimal, isn't it?
Yes.
I felt it still captured something that the other one didn't. The other one was, yes, it's there, it's kind of in your face, it's explaining what it is without me explaining. And this one's a little more quiet and a little more delicate. And I felt that was really capturing the essence of what I saw on the street, that even though some people seemed really hard and angry and things that were not right with them, I felt a piece of it that was very soft and yet strong, because I feel he's soft, but yet he's strong in his facial expressions. And the beard is just, there were so many men there who just weren't able to shave, and the disheveled hair is just disheveled. And yet I felt there was a beauty in that. And so when I drew it, I tried to make it more beautiful and more accessible.
Thank you for that. And I can share my reflection with you. It's by seeing the way you draw those homeless people, especially the expression and the line and the color you're using, and just simply just the shade and the pencil. You actually removed my tendency of not watching them on the street, So I'm be more leading toward to look at them, see what you were seeing from them without even judging their experience or what they choose or not choose to do. It's just that their present time is showing this. And I appreciate that kind of my mindset and reflection. Thank you for that.
So as an art professor, I'm thrilled that you're saying that.
Well, I don't have any talent on the hour anyway. Do we have any other questions? We good?
Question about, the drawings. It is up to us if we regard what you do successful.
Yeah,
What was it? I missed it. I missed
I think you be the judge. Whether or not you think I succeeded at doing this, you be the judge.
succeed doing what?
Portraying homelessness through these two
Okay.
drawings.
Well, is it realistic or something else?
I don't know what you mean.
Exactly. That's the way to judge whether it is successful or not.
Mhm.
That word was your intention, to be realistic or to be surrealistic? I
That's
think
hard
I
to
get the
say.
message.
Yeah,
So
okay,
therefore, that's successful.
okay, great. It's definitely not surrealistic.
It's related to this person. So what made you to choose him to draw?
Well, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but it was not one person. There was not one person who sat there for me and I drew it when I got home. And it's a composite of people that I saw along the way and just kind of put it together into one drawing. Because I did not want to draw 10 people. I just wanted to draw one person that these people resonated for me, and I just wanted to put little pieces together like a puzzle.
Thank you.
Any questions? No? If you don't have questions, then thank you, Rikki,
Okay,
again today
thank
for
you.
the nice talk
Thank
and
you.
sharing and the question answer
Great.
and the beautiful pictures.
Thanks.